Okay guys, today what we're going to do is we're going to look at our first set of some simple machines, and that is going to be the wheel and the inclined plane. Okay, and so there's 6 of them actually in all. The 2 of them we're going to look at are the wheel and the inclined plane. We're going to start first off by watching a video about each one of them, and then we're going to talk about some examples of things that we use in everyday life that has each type of simple machine. So think of something that has wheels in it or as a part of it, and also the inclined plane. Think of things that we use in life or that we see in life that have the inclined plane as a part of it or maybe as the entire thing. Okay, so let's first start off with the wheel.
Talk about is the wheel and axle. The wheel and axle is a simple machine made up of a wheel connected to a post. The post is called an axle. Wheels and axles help people apply more force or lift a heavy load with less effort. An example of a wheel and axle used to apply more force is when you use a wrench to turn a bolt. The wrench is the wheel and the bolt is the axle. When you turn the wrench, it moves a greater distance than the axle, but it takes less effort to turn it. The axle moves a shorter distance, but it turns with greater force. Here's a good example of a wheel and axle. The large crank is the wheel that turns the axle, winding the cable around the axle and lifting the pulley and object. We use wheels and axles every day. For example, cars use wheels and axles. A screwdriver is a wheel and axle. The handle of the screwdriver is the wheel, and the shaft is the axle. A doorknob is a wheel and axle too. The actual knob is the wheel, and the shaft is the axle. Have you ever tried to open a door where the doorknob fell off and all that was left was the shaft? It's much more difficult to open the door because you have to use more force. When you add the wheel back on, less effort is needed. A special kind of wheel is called a gear. Gears are toothed wheels. Gears can transfer forces from one part of a machine to another.
Okay, so there in the video you heard about different types of wheels and or wheel and axles, and so some of the ones that they shared in the video were, they talked about wrench and a bolt. They talked about, cars have wheels. They talked about how the doorknob, it was a wheel and axle, that the knob itself was the wheel, and the part that connects the knob to the door is actually the axle. And so, like they showed in the video, if you don't have the knob part and you're just trying to turn the axle portion or the shaft, it's really hard to open that door. It makes it very difficult. Okay. They also talked about gears. A lot of times we find gears in more complex type machines, and so gear is another type of wheel and axle. So what I want you guys to do today, we're going to still watch the other video about inclined planes, but I also want you to think about what other things in your life have a wheel, something that turns around an axle. Something I was thinking about is a manual can opener. The can openers that we use with our hands, not the ones that even are automatic too, they have that blade that cuts open the can of food, and that blade turns around that blade turns over top of the can in order to open it. Okay, so the part that turns is actually the blade, but it's in the shape of a wheel, and so it has a wheel and axle as well. Okay, so be thinking about other types of examples of inclined planes that we have in real life. Another one that we have here, we're going to watch the inclined plane video.
Let's talk about inclined planes first. An inclined plane is a sloping surface that makes it easier to move objects to a higher or lower place. An example of an inclined plane is a ramp. Roads have ramps that help people drive their cars onto and off of a highway. You've even seen inclined planes at the playground. A slide is an inclined plane. Inclined planes can be very helpful when people move. For example, Jack's family is moving, and they have to load furniture and boxes from the ground up into the truck. Let's say we have to get this box into the truck. It's only a short distance from the ground to the truck, but it requires too much effort to lift the box. To make it easier, we can use an inclined plane. By using an inclined plane, we have to move the box a longer distance, but less effort is needed to move it. When we use the inclined plane, the same amount of work is done, but the work is easier to do. See the relationship between force and distance? By using an inclined plane to raise the box, we decrease the amount of effort or force needed, but increase the distance we had to move the box.
Okay, so on that video, you saw some examples of inclined planes, and the purpose, again, of all of these simple machines is to make work a little bit easier. And so for the wheel, you know, using that example of the doorknob, if I didn't have that wheel, I'd have to work really hard to try and open up that door with just the axle. But having the wheel and axle combined, I'm able to turn that wheel, and it's able to turn over a greater distance. The inclined plane, you saw with that inclined plane, if I had to just lift the box onto the truck, it requires more work, but it's over a shorter distance. With the inclined plane, it makes it easier for humans because I'm able to move that box. Yeah, it's a greater distance, but it makes it a little bit easier for everyone to do. Okay, so what were some examples of inclined planes? You saw in the video that they mentioned like highway ramps. A lot of highway ramps that we have that go on and off of the highway. The ones that, you know, we're coming off of another road, we're trying to get on the highway, that's a ramp. Maybe it's going down, maybe it's going up. Both same for getting on and off the highway. So those are highway ramps, but also if you think about it too, there's handicapped ramps. A lot of times going into public places, so schools and businesses and stores, you're going to see that they have some kind of ramp that allows someone who is handicapped to be able to, or someone that has a hard time even walking, to be able to, instead of taking a step to get from the pavement up into the, so like here's my step, here would be the pavement, to get up, to go up a step to get into the establishment, the business establishment. Instead, what they'll do is there's a section of the concrete or the step that has been kind of shaved off, and it's that way they can gradually walk, and so it's created a ramp for them to get up into the establishment better, the business. And so that's the purpose of an inclined plane. And so it moves over a greater distance, but it makes that work just a little bit easier. Okay, so on your assignment today, I want you to be thinking about some other examples of inclined plane and some examples of a wheel that you might see in everyday life. And one of the other things you're going to think about, how does it help make work easier for people? Okay, so that's your assignment with the wheel and the inclined plane.